Suicide. It's a loaded word that brings with it all kinds of thoughts, images, and judgments. Speak of suicide and it opens up a Pandora's box. We sympathize, empathize, try to understand what drives someone to this ultimate act. And yes, we also judge the person who decides they are going to end their life this way, some even calling it a selfish act. And we judge the people around them too, asking questions like, didn't you see it coming? But how much real thought do we give to the person who saw no other way out, no other way of ending their pain? And how much thought do we give to those left behind, picking up the pieces, wondering what it was they did or didn't do, could have, would have, should have done, and whether it would have made any difference at all? To help us answer some of those questions today on Syntropy, we're talking to Kumeshnie. Her daughter Kayla died by suicide in 2013. She was just 17 years old. Kumeshnie, I have no words to express my gratitude to you for coming through to have this discussion. It's an incredibly difficult one, I'm sure, for you. You've been talking about it for years, and also difficult for people to hear, for the rest of us to hear. But thank you for coming through.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. Tell us about Kayla and tell us what happened.
So, Kayla died from suicide. She didn't commit suicide because when you think of the word commit, it's like I've committed a crime. So Kayla struggled with mental illness based on a number of factors. But sadly, she lost her battle on the 25th of March, 2013, at approximately 2 p.m. in the afternoon. So how did we get there? It's been a decade of a journey. And the first thing I'd like to touch on is the why. Because there actually there's no answer to the why. There was a moment where Kayla decided that she couldn't take the pain anymore. And that was the moment, in the split second probably, she made the decision. But this is Kayla's story, a story that has fundamentally changed our lives, but also a story that shouldn't go unsaid. Part of Kayla's diary said, "Don't forget me." And I think in saying "don't forget me," never could you forget, but don't forget my journey. Don't forget to speak out on behalf of me. Don't forget to tell my story, because my story needs to be told. Kayla was born on the 29th of Feb, 2006. So it was a very difficult time. It was 1996. It was a very difficult time in terms of a young mother that I was. I was 20 years old. And the 29th of Feb at 6 a.m. in the morning, there was a world cricket match going on, and I had a dinosaur of a doctor. And there was problems. So eventually we decided the child has to come out. There was a number of people surrounding us. But Kayla's entry into the world was very similar to how she left the world. So the cord was tightly coupled around her neck. Kayla then sort of had this hand come up and sort of held the cord between her neck so that her hand would actually help her journey into the earth. Sadly, Kayla lost her battle in the same way. Kayla hung herself. And the very thing that brought her into the world was similar to how she left. So let's talk about Kayla's story.
Yeah, tell us where, as much as you want to tell us, as much as Kayla would want you to tell us as well, about what happened that day and what led to that, what you know now led to that.
So at the age of 15, Kayla got hormonal, like most girls her age, and probably started dabbling in a boyfriend idea. And at the same time, Kayla realized that between the age of 1 to 3, she was sexually abused. So Kayla's journey actually started with trying to figure out what had happened between 1 and 3. But it also then started off a Pandora's box of saying, what did I do? What did I do to deserve the abuse? Kayla was sexually abused by a female domestic worker. And does it matter whether it's a male or female? Actually not. The same thing probably gets felt. Can I go back and say, what did it feel like for a 3-year-old to be sexually abused? Well, it ended in suicide. But that was not the only reason. There's a journey that you live through. There's a number of things that happened. You work through each day and you get help, but there's school. There's parents like me, strict parents. Yeah. I come from a traditional Indian background. You're not allowed to date. You're not allowed to wear certain clothes. Yeah. You have to stick to what society tells you. So I can safely say that I was brought up in a very strict upbringing, and Kayla was given that taste of it. So when I realized that Kayla was starting to like boys, I was like, no, we don't do this. We don't date people, and we're not allowed to go out. And what if somebody sees you?
They don't come home. Boys don't come home. You don't go to his house. Doesn't happen. Yeah.
So I think the judgment already of the traditional Indian family and what would people say started probably when Kayla was 15. But what I didn't realize was the aftermath of what was to come. So Kayla was then, she told us what she felt. I'm suicidal. So for a parent to hear that, you're like, oh my God, like, you don't know what you're saying.
When did she start to tell you that, Kumeshnie?
When she was 15.
When she started, and when did these flashbacks or feelings happen of what had happened to her as a toddler?
I think it was when she turned 15 and she started liking boys. There's a hormone that probably kicked in that triggered deep memory. Because for a child to remember exactly what happened between the age of 1 to 3 is not heard of. It was so traumatic that she could piece together exactly what happened. She wrote about it. She told her therapist about it. But she left no stone unturned in trying to understand it. But it was the understanding at too late. It happened too late. That led her to the path that she had chosen.
And before she turned 15, behaviorally, was there anything, if you look back now, that you may have said, links to what had happened to her when she did realize this is what had happened? Before 15, pretty ordinary teenage, adolescent life?
Yeah, I think there were signs, but never would I have thought that it was a sexual abuse.
And it's hard to know with growing children and little girls and life as they have it now.
Yeah, so I think for me, it was like, no, you don't go near like the painter or the electrician because abuse has a face. Actually, it doesn't. This was a female domestic worker that I entrusted with my child. So abuse, firstly, doesn't have a face. It can happen to anybody. What I think it sort of rolled on from there was the fact that it was female. So there were two parts to that. Firstly, I am abused, but I'm abused by female. So there's something wrong with me. And that's really the web that started. Because if I feed my mind this, it means that I was the problem. And Kayla's journey started with the toxic behavior of what the maid did into I'm the problem. It happened to me because there's something wrong with me. And therefore, I think therapy would have helped if it started a decade before, because it would have taught the mind to unthink what it taught itself. So your mind is powerful. It could be your worst enemy or your biggest supporter. And sadly, Kayla's journey led her mind to become toxic of herself.
And then take us to when this happened at 15. What happened up until that day that you found her?
So when she turned to her godmother, never told us, said she was sexually abused. Again, you then think about yourself, right? Like, where was I? What did I do? Is it something that I could have prevented? No, she's actually not telling the truth. She could have never been sexually abused. I was there all the time. There were people there. So you go to trying to sort of put a spin on it that would feed your mind the fact that this would have never happened in my house. This could have never happened in my house.
Yeah.
This is something that doesn't happen to my family. And then as we unraveled each piece, we've realized that it did happen. There's no memory as strong as that or traumatic as that. If somebody can piece together what happened to them at the age of 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is not a made-up fairy tale version. And you know what? There were signs. There were signs that there was something wrong with this relationship that she had with the domestic worker. But my eyes, my rose-colored lens told me to see what I wanted to see. It didn't tell me the radar needs to go up, Kumeshnie, because there is something wrong. It didn't teach me that I should have spoken out and said to somebody, hey, if this happened in your house, surely there's something wrong with this picture. The sad part for Kayla is she loved this female. And that's really, I think, her torment. That's where her brain couldn't sort of say, was this right? Was it wrong? Did I enjoy it? Did I not? At 3. I mean, a 3-year-old doesn't know any better.
You can't unpack that.
So Kayla went to a therapist, telling the therapist that she's suicidal. Alarm bells went off. We put her in a hospital immediately. And then starts it must be you. You know, she must have a problem with her mother.
Oh.
Or she must have a problem at school.
Who was saying that? Family, friends?
So the thing is, within the family, you blame each other. Oh. So my husband would say, I'm sure if you had a better relationship with her, there'd be a better kind of bond and she'd be able to talk to you. And I would say, I'm sure if you were at home most of the time, we would have picked up these signs. But we're not home. We work. We're trying to give our children a better life than we had. They need to go to private schools. They need to have all the latest and the greatest. So there's a reason. You'd always find, we can find a reason for why this happened. There is no reason. So there is no, why did she do it? Why did she leave me? Kayla ended her journey because she could not live with the fact that all of these things were haunting her, besides just being a normal teenager. So the teenager of today is different from decades ago. We were brought up in very close-knit communities. We had lots of grannies to talk to. We had lots of people around us that watched our behavior. It's different. So 10 years ago when Kayla decided to end her journey, even though she had support, it was not the same support like the villages we had.
Yeah.
The auntie across the street would watch your behavior.
In most people's houses, you were.
So I think there's the difference. And she was put into a clinic and put in a young adult program for 21 days. So if you talk about pain, Kayla's pain came out in her cutting herself. So because she had no way of articulating her pain, the one thing that she could do was cause herself harm. And that harm just kept getting deeper and deeper. So a layer of skin, and then 2 layers of skin, and then 3 layers of skin, and then blades, and maybe 6 layers of skin. So she went into the program. She was given a psychiatrist. She was given a psychologist. She had a team of people working with her. She was taught to go through the different kinds of therapy, the tools. She was put on medication. There was changing medication. There was a number of things that get done. So in February of 2013, Kayla had showed signs of just continue hurting herself. Kayla didn't want us to understand the deep pain she felt and didn't want to explain the abuse, but she did to her therapist. And she lived a life that was a little bit reckless. So Kayla was a very good, always listening, eldest child, brought up with you need to be perfect.
And by this time you'd had another daughter, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
I had a daughter, Kiana. She was 2 years younger than Kayla. And because they were so close, you would say they were twins. And Kiana actually she knew. Kayla had confided in her. So Kiana's battle comes later on in life. And Kayla then lived a reckless life. She would bunk school. She would not do her homework. She would not study. So all of the things probably leading her to believe that I'm not going to be around. Never something that I saw.
Yeah.
So in my lens, it was always, we could get you help. every problem has a solution. So we've had a number of initiatives that could get you to where you need to get to. What I didn't see was the deep torment she caused herself. So the being awake all night, scrubbing herself so she could get rid of this thing that she imposed on her brain, that I'm the problem, that I was sexually abused because it was my fault. So those are the kinds of things that you never see. Those are the underlying things that become toxic and you poison your own mind against yourself. Kayla then was allowed to date because I thought, okay, I'm being a ridiculous Indian mother. Let me allow her to go to a Valentine's Day ball. Looked beautiful. Kayla was a beautiful girl. She dressed up and it really was a good night for her. She took her partner. And then at the end of Feb, Kayla turned 17. So, had a nice time, beautiful celebration, had friends over. But what I didn't realize, that in Kayla's mind, she had already started planning her suicide. So Kayla had researched suicide. She drew what suicide looks like. She wrote what suicide was about. She planned her suicide. But probably for me, the worst part is, and the guilt that I've had to work through, is how do you not know? How do you not pick up any kind of clue? Every time a young teenager is in their room by themselves, we're like, they're just teenagers.
Yeah.
They're okay. Let them be.
They don't like us much right now. Yeah.
That's actually not the case.
Yeah.
So alone thoughts are probably the worst thoughts. So the more alone time you have, the more time you have to think, like, let me detach from the world, which is I didn't see that. I saw a hormonal teenager. And you know what? It was easier to let her deal with herself in a room than have an argument with her.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
So weeks go by. Now we get to the weekend of the 24th of March. We have a braai. Kayla and I have a number of arguments that weekend because I find another cut.
Oh.
So let me explain what a cut probably means. It was a moment of fear that I then threw out anger. So my fear turned to anger and I was like, you can't be doing this. We're getting you lots of help. And really it became about me. It became about what I was feeling instead of what Kayla was feeling. Because I think I started then imagining or thinking that this actually could become a reality. As much as I didn't want to believe it, there was a tiny thought that said, there's something wrong here, but I didn't want to believe it. So the very next morning, this was the morning of the 25th of March, Kayla was on holiday. I remember walking past her room and sort of giving it the side eye because I was angry. I was so angry with her. I didn't say good morning. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say anything. I left the house and went to work. She was in her room. And she stayed there for most of the day. Yeah. I did have a conversation with Kayla, probably an hour before she died, because I got a frantic call from home saying there's something going on. Kayla has locked herself in the room. I called her therapist. And then when I called her, she was like, oh, no, nothing's happening. I called my therapist. I'm going to see him just now. Okay. And I'm like, Kayla, I'm going to remove every window. I'm going to remove every door because I made it about me. I made it about how scared that I was instead of saying, like, what could I do to help you? So I wanted to sort of frighten her into like saying, no, you can't lock your doors and stuff like that. And Kayla behaved normal that day. She went and got Nando's. She let the helper in to get the iron, but her door was closed and locked most of the day. So why do I say Kayla planned her suicide? We couldn't find one key to get into the door. Here's the thing about where we live. We bolster it so much that nobody can get in. But when your life needs saving, nobody can get in. So Kayla had burglar bars around her window from the outside. Yeah. Her door was a lock-in door that you couldn't break from the outside. Gosh. Okay, so these are all the things that you do to protect your child. Yeah. There were a number of things that the day could have gone differently. So we got a call, we rushed home, so this I think is really important. So I told you about Kayla's journey of how she entered the world. But I also knew when Kayla left the world. So it was just before 2:00. I'd spoken to her saying, I'm on my way home. Don't do anything. Get your therapist on the phone. And those are all the things, like Kayla was, a very obedient child. Yes, Mum, I've done all of those things. Yes, Mum, I'm not doing anything. She knew the things to say to me because Kayla was obedient. As I took the turn off Bayers, I got a call from my child, Kiana, who was 2 years younger than Kayla, to say, Mum, you need to come home now. Something really bad has happened. But before I got the call, I knew Kayla had taken her life. The same way she had left to come into the world was the same feeling I had when she left the world.
What was that feeling?
So it was deep in the pit of my stomach. I could feel something really bad and tragic had happened. So the time that Kayla probably took her life was the same time I had the feeling. And only a mother can feel something like that. It's indescribable. So the same way you birth a child, it's difficult to explain when they leave the feeling you get in the pit of your stomach. So you hold them in your womb for 9 months, and you probably feel it in the same place again when they leave. I get home. There's a hive of activity. There's cars in the driveway. There's screaming. I just wanted to clear my mind. I just say, there's no way she could have done this. We can save her. There's ambulance. There's security guards. People have hammered down the door. They've brought her down. There's a number of different things that go through your mind. And one of them being is that I've just lost my child. Like, is this even true? I say to the ambulance, the paramedic, you have to save her. Like, she can't die. She's 17. There's no way she can die. They put machines on her. And then I think, oh my God, if you wake up, you're going to scream at me. You're going to say, like, why did you do this? You never leave me alone. You're always disturbing my peace. And what if I'm a vegetable? What are you going to do with me? So all of these thoughts race in your head. And you think, like, I don't know what to do. Is this the right thing? Is this the wrong thing? Kayla knew that if she died from hanging herself, it would be a quick death. So she counted. She knew how many minutes it would take. She knew how quickly or not so quickly people would get to her because she bolstered up her room. But what Kayla also did is she wrote on every single wall in her room, every single mirror in her room, the shower door. And this then led me to believe that this is what Kayla wanted. Is it okay? Absolutely not. It wasn't okay. Now starts the, like, are you sure? Are you sure that she's died? Now starts the blame. Now starts the judgment. Now starts the why. And all the time, we had her little sister looking in. So how does an immature 14-year-old turning 15 understand the aftermath of her closest being leaving her? How does a family even begin to stitch together, like, what's happened? It's indescribable. So on the 25th of March, Kayla sadly lost her battle. We can call it depression. We can call it mental illness. We can call it because of sexual abuse. We can call it Kayla was unhappy. But we stigmatize everything so much. But Kayla died from suicide.
If you're happy to share with us, if you're comfortable to share with us, what was it that she wrote on every wall? And if you think she would want you to tell us, Kumeshnie, what gave you absolutely no doubt that this is what she wanted?
So, Uveka, I think the thing that Kayla didn't leave us, like, longing to know was why. So a big portion of the why was I struggled with my own understanding of what happened to me. I struggled with the fact that I lived in a bubble of love. I thought love meant things. I thought love meant you won't hurt people. Kayla was a dreamer. Kayla lived in La La Land with unicorns and magical beings. In all her drawings, it was very reflective of the world that she came from. And the fact that somebody could hurt you and say they loved you and take care of you was probably the conundrum that broke her. The other thing was stress. Stress to an Indian parent. She was brought up very strict. She was not allowed to do what her peers did. She was brought up within boundaries. She was brought up with saying, you can't do those things. She was brought up with saying, you can't wear those things. She was brought up with saying, like, we don't go to those places. So very much a generational system trying to be put on a new generation doesn't work if you don't understand what the new generation needs. That was probably a combination of things, a combination of being in grade 11, peer pressure, not fitting in, not understanding herself, not believing in herself, not understanding that help could get you to where you needed to get to. Because to every one of life's problems, there is some kind of solution. She was too immature to see that. I think in a split second, she made a decision, be it an impulsive one, but that was her way out. She didn't see any other way.
But in all the material that you found in her room afterwards, or the planning that you found, how long would you say, or when would you say this decision became for her the thing to do now? It wasn't just a fantasy. It wasn't just dabbling. That this was something she started to plan and knew she was going to carry out at a certain time.
So I think it started when she hit age 15, but I think the plan became really solid when she started turning 16. So between the age of 16 until the day she probably turned 17, it was a very thorough, well thought out. I'm going to make sure that I close every single loophole. That's how it looked. Nobody can get in. I can't get out. I won't change my mind, although she did have the opportunity to.
And you also say she had met a boy.
Yes.
And, she had gone on her first Valentine's Day ball or party. I mean, where did that fit into the picture? Was there at that point, maybe you thought it was a turning point? Was that person, did he say anything after this happened?
I never thought when Kayla first told us of her problems that, like I said to you, I didn't want to probably believe that suicide was real. But I thought if I had given her more freedom and if we sort of compromise, I'd become a less strict mother. She would then see that I was also trying to help, because part of the therapy is me helping as well. But the Valentine's Day thing was me then saying, hey, this is a new world we live in. We're not brought up the same way. I need to give in a little. So I do think, and part of into Kayla's diary was saying that this is the boy that tried to save her. He was also 15 or 16. I mean, what does he even know about suicide? And the fact that he's had to live with the aftermath of it. But I do think he brought her a lot of joy. I think that it was a good thing that she was allowed to feel what it was like to have a boyfriend and go on a date. But she knew better. She knew what she wanted to do, and probably wrote saying, thank you for trying to save me.
Do you think as her mum, like you say, when she left this world, you had that feeling? Do you think she found peace after that?
Kayla definitely found peace because you don't have those horrible thoughts anymore. I'm hoping in afterlife you don't, because then it's not, you don't want to live with those same thoughts. Sadly, suicide is an aftermath for the people that are left behind.
Yeah. And that's where I want to go next, is from your other daughter, Kayla's sister, your husband, and I believe you had your in-laws living with you as well. Were they living with you at the time that this happened?
They lived there. So I think my in-laws had died probably within 2 years of Kayla dying. Mm. So here's this thing about a typical Indian household. The granny and grandfather's always available, taking care of kids, cooking. But they were also the people that were at home that day. So the typical thing to do is ask why. There is no one to blame for Kayla's death. Mm. But those are the things that probably go through your mind. And in hindsight, people shouldn't be asking why. Because you want to find a reason for why your child left you. You want to blame somebody for why your child left you. And you turn on each other. Because surely it has to be somebody in this house. Surely somebody should know what's happened. And I think my in-laws were really, really great grandparents. I would have never reached my corporate career if it was not for them. But I do think that they blamed themselves for nothing that they were responsible for. They were there, they were part of the family, but it was nothing that they could do. But like Kayla had her own thoughts, I think that contributed a lot to how they felt. And therefore, within 2 years, both of them had passed on. For Kiana, it was a completely different journey. It was like, you left me. You've abandoned me. There's a number of things that then went through her own mind, and she found different coping mechanisms, and all of them not good. How do you sort of tell yourself that you knew your sister was going to die from suicide and did nothing about it? As a 15-year-old, no 15-year-old should go through that. So the journey after Kayla has been unbelievable in terms of good and bad. There were many bad things that have happened in terms of finding peace, in terms of understanding why. I sit here today and I can't say to you that you'd ever answer that question. But out of that also came a little life. Dia is now 9, turning 9.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Dia was born a year and a few months after Kayla died. Not a planned pregnancy. I'm going to put it down to divine intervention. Dia was given the name Dia because it means light. In the darkness that we were surviving, Dia gave us some hope. Dia doesn't replace Kayla, but purpose-wise, love that we have, finding our way back to giving was through Dia. But Dia also helped us break the cycle of healing. She often asks questions about Kayla. I've not told her yet. I don't think she would understand, but I would definitely tell her.
So she's 9 now. Yeah.
So I don't think from a maturity point of view. However, Dia is sort of the bridge that has come in, never as a replacement. I had lots of people say to me, you should have a child, Kumeshnie, after Kayla died. And
how did that make you feel? You must have been so pissed off.
So here's the thing about society. You can't judge how other people want to convey sympathy to you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think a big reflection for me is people they don't know how to deal with you. They don't know what to say to you. And it's okay. Say nothing. Don't say it's God's way. Or don't say time heals everything. Or don't ask why. Just be there. And there were many, many, many people that sat with us day and night, just being there. There were many people that came and went. There were many people that still are. There is, and it continues to be, many people that reach out on Kayla's birthday, Kayla's death anniversary. There are many people who stayed away. And that's okay. It's okay. It's not, people feel if they're in a situation that you're in, it may happen to them.
And in your house, in the meantime, you had this happening. Dia was born. your daughter, Kayla's sister, your husband?
Yeah, so the big lesson I think out of this is that families get destroyed. There's you can't live the life that you lived. So don't live in that anymore. Don't say you want the life that you had. You can't have that life because Kayla's not there anymore. So we went through a lot of therapy, but the mistake in the therapy was we did it individually. You can't heal in individualism. You can't heal if you don't talk to each other and blame each other to your face and not try and do it outside of that. And you know what? Guilt is about blaming somebody. So when you sit with guilt, you have to blame somebody. It's probably human nature until you learn that you use the toolbox that you get given in terms of healing. And healing doesn't mean I'm forgetting about Kayla.
Yeah.
So we all went on our different journey. We all had different ways of coping. We all had different avenues. We lived separate lives. Addiction was a big part of it. And it led us to things that you call an evil addiction. So there's no such thing as a good addiction and a bad addiction. Until probably 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, if you decide you want to stick together as a family, then you have to openly say to each other what you feel. You have to openly blame each other. You have to go for therapy. You have to go for help. And we still do that 10 years down the line. We're still working through it. Sadly, Kiana, who's had a struggle for the last 10 years, continues to fight her struggle. She's the bravest girl I know. She's been through so much, bad relationships, addictions, people letting her down, people taking advantage of her, all the guilt and blame that she sits with, which a 15-year-old cannot take accountability for that.
Has she expressed what she actually feels guilty about?
So I think a big part of the guilt is I could have done something. A big part of the guilt is I could have told somebody. Or if I did, why didn't my parents take me seriously? Or I could have prevented it.
Told somebody what? What did she know at the time?
So it seems like Kayla sort of confided in Kiana, saying, listen, I don't want to live anymore. And at probably 14, I mean, at that age, what does a 14-year-old know? And I think her sister was her world. You know, they did everything together. They were best friends. So I do think that a lot of that guilt is imposed on her, partly because we think society expects us to know. Like, if something like this happens, you should know better, or there should be a correct answer, or this shouldn't be happening in your house. So it's really around judgment, which Kiana is not responsible for at all. So a big part of the aftermath is you sitting with guilt. And that's for my husband, myself, and for Kiana.
And where are you now, 10 years later? You say you've done the therapy, you're doing it, it's constant healing. Every day is a work in progress, I'm sure. Every morning you wake up. What happens in your household? What's a day in the life of you guys now?
So, yeah, it's still not easy. Probably the morning after you going to bed, the worst thing is you get up and you realize, actually, she is gone.
Does it happen every day?
It's 10 years down the line and nothing's changed. I still think of her all the time. I still get up in the morning thinking, oh, okay, she is really gone. The thing that I think helps is the healing process. And healing is not to forget, but to tell Kayla's story so that we don't stigmatize mental illness. So my journey has really been about being open about how I feel, being open about what's happened in my family, and not having secrets. So the big thing about stigmatizing mental illness is we want to say that it doesn't happen in our culture, or it doesn't happen from a certain socio-economic background, or it doesn't happen in families like ours. I don't know. What does suicide look like? So every single day, we wake up still wanting, still longing, still hoping that it shouldn't have happened. But we also wake up knowing that Kayla's story can change somebody else's life.
Absolutely.
So I think Kayla's journey is, it shouldn't be an unspoken or unsaid, or it shouldn't be an embarrassment. So people are going to judge. Let them judge anyway.
And it happened. It happened the day of her funeral, didn't it?
Yeah.
I remember. And, Kumeshnie and I, for those listening, we kind of met about a year ago, but we had seen each other now and then. So I kind of have a gist of what happened. And I remember you telling me that the day of the funeral, you actually kicked a lot of people out of your house, or around that time.
Yeah. So people have to have somebody to blame. Again, it is the thing that needs to happen. You have to blame somebody, because then it makes it better. There is nobody to blame. So there's the number of things that go into turmoil with that, and you make some people live around you for the rest of your life, and some people leave your life. But you can't be the one that sort of manages that.
Yeah. People
will do what they need to do, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Wow, it's such a big thing, this realization, and it takes so much to get to that point that you are at, Kumeshnie. And you speak of having the fight with Kayla the day before, and you were still angry that morning, and all of that. After everything, were you still angry with her? Did you think maybe it was a selfish thing that she did?
Never. So, I'm not just saying this because
people tend to think that death by suicide is selfish. A lot of people think that. Let's just put it out there. They think, okay, you're gone, you've ended your pain, but you've left everybody else to pick up the pieces. And I've just heard that from other conversations, and speaking to other people. Yeah.
So I think the minute I realized that Kayla died, I also realized that she was in deep pain. So I wasn't angry. I wasn't angry at anyone in my home. I was probably angry with myself. I had lots of guilt, specifically around the last conversation we had, which was an hour before she died. So I didn't think it was selfish, actually. I think that she tried to give us as much information to live with it. She told us how much she loved us. She asked for forgiveness. I mean, those were all the things that she had written down. She didn't write down things that she didn't believe she needed to convey. She wrote down things that she needed to convey, like forgive her. So she asked us to forgive her for something that she was in turmoil for. There's never, ever been a day in my life where I sit down and say, and I'm not just saying this because I'm giving you Kayla's story, like the selfish thing to do is to die by suicide. Because nobody can understand that journey. No family can understand the aftermath of it unless you've been through it. We can all say we understand. And for somebody that has lost a child to suicide, I don't need you to understand my pain. I need you to understand the journey so we remove the stigma.
Absolutely.
So for me, there's the lesson in Kayla's story, is that there's no shame, there's no judgment, there's no stigmatization. So if we suffer from mental illnesses, you're not an outcast. If you feel sad or depressed, there's nothing wrong with you. I have cancer, or if I have flu, or if I had COVID, I've been able to medicate. I go to an oncologist if I have cancer, and I'm put on a treatment program. I have diabetes. I get given insulin.
Yeah.
So I think the big thing about depression and mental illness, I'm really passionate about the teenage part of it, just because I believe that we don't have enough of a conversation about it. We stigmatize it and we make it shameful.
Yeah.
So somebody that's already feeling shameful, we put them in a box and say, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
But if I have cancer, I'm categorized in a cancer kind of way, and people will come see me.
It's a different sympathy. Yeah.
Yeah, but sympathy. Why should we choose? So definitely, I don't believe she was acting in any other way but showing up for what she felt deep inside.
And Kumeshnie, you speak of your guilt. What have you done with that? I know that you're still working at it.
Yeah.
If you can give us, and you don't have to.
No.
But if you can give us how do you work through this every day?
So after Kayla died, I wrote to her for 365 days, begging for forgiveness on the first day, telling her how sorry I was on the second day, but also giving her a snippet of what life was without her. Because I think if Kayla knew that our family would not be complete without her, maybe she would have changed her mind. So when I wrote down exactly what I felt, asking for forgiveness and saying I should have been a better mother and I should have done things better, doesn't take that away. So it had to come with a number of things. It had to come with some spiritual healing, which continues every day. It had to come with difficult conversations with myself. It had to come with understanding that a portion of how I contributed to it needed to be exposed in terms of me dealing with it. So there was an elephant in the room. I had to deal with it. Yeah. So later on in the journey, I went to all of her therapists to stitch together her story. And a lot of them tell you the same thing, is that there are things that you could have done, but there are also things that you couldn't have done. So it was basically a decade and continues being a decade of work on myself, on my husband, on my family. And we don't by any means live a perfect life because there is no perfection in this world.
And how do you just get up and you're in corporate? How do you do it? How do you go? How do you get to an office? I mean, maybe in 10 years you've fallen into a pattern. In those first weeks and months afterwards, how did you do it?
So I threw myself into work because that's a coping mechanism. So 2 weeks after Kayla died, I went back to work. And that's when the loneliness journey begins, because you all grieve in different ways. So grieving as a cycle, denial, then I'm angry, then I get therapy, then the cycle starts again. And it can be a toxic cycle. So there is no addiction that's good or bad, as I said previously. So I threw myself into work because that was my coping mechanism. For me, it's like 20-hour days, and then you're not really dealing with the elephant in the room. But as you unravel, you also then give yourself the opportunity to heal, and healing becomes a coping mechanism. Talking about it, being open about it, those kinds of things become the coping mechanism. Does the journey ever end when you lose your child? Absolutely not. You do work on yourself every single day. There's never a moment that I don't think of Kayla. I drive to work, I hear a song. I remember a time when we danced to a song. So I think the memories of Kayla don't ever die down. I think each year we just have to keep working on ourselves. I think the big thing for me is society understanding that young kids need coping mechanisms. And don't stigmatize it. Don't call it a therapist. Get a life coach. Get a life coach. If you don't want the stigma around mental illness. And I think we'll be fooling ourselves if we think that kids today just cope. We live in a world that was completely different from where you and I come from 30 years ago. So the struggle that I had was living with poverty. The struggle that today's kids have is they have everything, but there's a number of factors that change the way they live compared to the way we live.
And also them comparing themselves to how others live. You're still in the same house?
Definitely not.
Okay.
So that was a big thing. We kept the house even though we moved for 2 years as a shrine to Kayla. And we really didn't want to move. But I think in some ways, to bring up Dia, probably if we didn't have her, in the same house would have been unfair to her. So I would have lived in that house, unfair to Dia.
Okay.
I would have lived in that house forever. Does it take away the memories? Absolutely not. They're hidden in your heart, in your head. it doesn't take a structure to keep a memory.
And I suppose, many people might be wondering at this point, what about the abusive nanny? Whatever happened to that? Maybe some might be wondering, would it bring you closure to find her or bring you closer to healing? Because you're never going to the wound doesn't close ever. I can't imagine that the wound. Did you try? What happened there?
On the day that Kayla died, the police came home, read the diary, and obviously tried to ask for the nanny. So this was probably 15 years later when it happened. And she wasn't the main caregiver, so we didn't really have much information about her. And I'm sure, in my head, I thought, let's find her down, let's hunt her. Would have that bring back Kayla? And part of the grief process is the fact that you want to blame somebody for it. So you want to find them and blame them. But it wouldn't have changed the status quo. The nanny was never found. We didn't try to look for her. Maybe my husband did. But we never had any of her details. And there was something in the nanny that I saw that led me to the decision that I made when we had said to her, we don't need her anymore. I just didn't know how to articulate it better, probably at the time. But there was something. I just didn't understand what it was. So, we've never tried. The police wanted to help us try and find her. But, that was something that I didn't give much thought to, because that would not have changed the journey.
Yeah. And just to let you have that, I want you to have the last word here. I mean, just if you could speak to a room full of people who've lost someone this way, what is the one most important thing, or two or three most important things you want them to know?
Yeah, I think the big thing is that we need to tell the story like it should be told. I think there's a lot of guilt and blame, and we'll work through those feelings. But the thing that we can do best is work through them. And the more we tell the story of suicide, the more people become aware. So for me, let's try and just stop the stigma against it. So if you're in a room full of people and there's gossip, there must be a reason for suicide, or there must have been something that happened. You can change the way that story goes by changing the narrative in the story. So contribute to it positively, without judgment, but also spread the word of it's not something that you should be ashamed of. So in many families, in fact, in my own story, people were saying, don't tell people how she died. Or they don't need to know. Yeah, they don't need to know. But if you don't tell them how she died, how do you carry on the torch of Kayla's story? And don't forget me. Yeah. Because that is her story.
Kumeshnie, I can't thank you enough. I don't know. You literally, just being able to tell us the story, but I see your purpose. I see you doing it for Kayla because, like you say, she didn't want to be forgotten. And her story will go on to help hundreds, thousands, millions of people who are going through what she did and those who are left behind. So friends, it's unthinkable that someone we love or someone close to us can die by suicide, that they take their own life. We go through a field of emotions riddled with landmines, questions that will probably never be answered or whose answers will never satisfy us. What was so bad that they couldn't talk to us about it? Why didn't we see what was happening? Did we not want to see? Call it desperate, brave, the ultimate sacrifice, or even selfish. We will never understand the act of suicide unless we've been to that place where nothing and absolutely nothing else can end the pain. The more spiritual and philosophical among us believe that those who make this choice do so with the certainty that the hereafter will bring better things. And maybe that's some comfort for those left behind to make sense of it all. Till the next time on Syntropy.